Welcome to the Purposeful in Life podcast, where our mission is to help individuals and organizations find their purpose so that they may live a life that is fulfilling and inspired in and out of work. Your hosts, Christina Hall and myself, Garrett Willey, are passionate to inspire, teach, mentor, and serve our community. We have 42 years of combined experience as entrepreneurs and in international corporations. Both of us have military backgrounds. Myself, Garrett, as a commissioned officer with over 9 years of service, and Christina as a military spouse of over 15 years. Welcome to Purposeful in Life, where together we go on the journey of discovering a life filled with purpose and intention. Okay, there'll probably be some pre-show talk too, which is fine because now are we on live on like Facebook Live, recording, going down?
Everything.
It's happening.
People can see us.
People can see us. I love it. I love it. And I hope people do. And I hope we help them and serve them because that's what life's about, is helping others. And our podcast title is Purposeful in Life. And your host is myself, Garrett Willey.
And Christina Hall.
Yep. And we're here with a wonderful guest. He's got a beautiful smile. Look at this guy.
Oh,
He's handsome.
Stop.
Oh my gosh. You're probably a ladies' man, aren't you? And
One lady. One.
One. Smart man. And we're here to talk about, obviously, living with purpose and intention like we do every week and see what we learn from our guest, Rich Rhodes. And Rich is a really neat guy. He has a podcast of his own, which we definitely want to plug here and talk about. And he also is a broker with New York Life? Or
Financial planner, yep.
Financial planner with New York Life. And there's SEC limitations to what you could say about that. But whatever, you need some financial help, go see this guy. Okay, the show's over now, so when you go to Rich Rhodes, what's your website? 1 minute long, it'll be the shortest one ever.
Perfect.
Go see Rich, like all 1,000 of you.
There you go. Done.
For financial advising. It works out. Cool. Now we have all the pressures gone. We can just talk about life and your journey and how you found what you do for a living and what you want to do.
Sure.
You know. So what about the podcast? What's it called?
So the podcast is called What the Heck Do You Do? And what we do each Thursday is we highlight a business owner who either has sort of an unusual business that maybe didn't exist in the last couple of years or not a lot of people know about it. Or they have what is a well-known job, but they go about it in such a unique way that it's worth highlighting. And so we basically just spend 30 minutes kind of digging into what the heck they actually do. And then we get into why do they do it? How they come about it? What are some misconceptions? The goal being just to bring more awareness to their business and what they do. It's kind of my give back to the community, similar to your give back here with that podcast. How the idea came about was, so in all our networking groups, I would meet people that just, quite frankly, I had no idea that their business even existed. I didn't know what it was. A couple come to mind. One is Ali Bozic, who's in Pinterest. So she's trying to do pop-up shops and real estate open houses. I sat at a table with her and I was like, I have so many questions. Like, I get the gist, but I have so many questions. And then it was probably a week or two later in a different networking group, I met Rachel Merrick, who's a posture alignment specialist. She'll say chiropractor for your muscles is one way she describes it. But essentially it's hands off and it's all done through exercises and the Egoscue method to put your alignment back into shape. So that way you don't keep having reoccurring injuries because your knee is twisted this way and your femur is twisted this way and your hip's twisted that way. So through a series of exercises, she gets everybody back on track.
Makes me want to sit a little bit better.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's
maybe I should like turn my chair so I'm not like twisted when I'm facing you. Camera, you can get the back of my head.
What she'll tell you is any position is fine as long as you balance it out by doing it the opposite way later. But it is funny though. Anytime I'm in a room like a networking room with her, and people see her, they immediately do one of these. She's like, guys, that's great, but that's not the gist. But anyway, so amongst all the people I've met at Ignite You and different people, Christina, we've done one-on-ones. Those two really just stood out to me. Like, if I have a one-on-one with you, that's one person who knows what you do now, and that just didn't feel like enough. There had to be an avenue to do more. And then just sitting with Bob, of course, with BD Local, and him talking about podcasts. I knew I wanted to do one at some point. The biggest issue being, like you said, I can't get on and give you financial advice. That's That's an absolute no-no.
Yeah.
So it was, okay, so what else can I do? What can I talk about? And so all of that synergy, I guess, just kind of came together one day. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to interview these business owners, give them a chance to talk more about what they do, explore it. And then they have an an archivable video that they can then share in their email signature on their website, et cetera, et cetera. And then hopefully as my audience continues to grow, then people are getting exposure to new businesses. So that's really how it ultimately came about.
So that's going to help them, because that's the question that's rolling through my mind. I was like, how does this? I'm also thinking, how does it reach the listener? Like obviously we want to. How do I reach the listener here? Like, how do we grow this so that more people are impacted in a positive way? When you're asking people why they ended up in that route, why they moved towards whatever it is that they do, you're hoping to actually help positively impact their lives and others.
Right.
Right. And so we can't do that if it doesn't reach more people.
Yeah.
Right. Have you thought about how to market that or share it with others?
Yeah, it's funny. So my guest, Jimmy Smith, who will be on this week, him and I were talking about that. And so that is the piece. I kind of just said, hey, I have this idea. Let me see if I can get some people to sign up. And when I started at the end of September, I said, well, hey, if I can get enough guests to get to Thanksgiving, that'll be great. That'll give me a chance to test it out.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I was booked till Christmas. And then all of a sudden I was booked till February. So I was like, okay, this is going to go on for a while. So I have this opportunity to help it evolve. And so a lot of my thought heading into this year is sort of, what changes can I make to the show to make them more broad, more holistic, give advice or share tidbits that are more usable,
interesting to the general public,
to the general public, so that,
or other business owners, right?
Right. So if you're not necessarily, if you know somebody who needs posture alignment and you hear that episode, you might think Uncle Frank needs his help, her help, or I need her help because my back's, whatever it is. But I agree. Yeah. That global piece that would make somebody tune in every week versus tuning in because it's your friend who owns the business or they're sending out the video.
Yeah. Like a part of the show that's like a specific, I don't know what it is. I'm hyperbole or brainstorming here. Because again, the conversation that we're having here, if you're listening to us, you're just the fourth person sitting at the table.
Right.
We're just having a conversation to try to figure out how to live our lives better and with purpose and intention and help others to do the same.
Yep.
Because we want to make an impact on others. Because as we serve others, we fulfill ourselves.
Yep.
And that's where the whole purpose thing comes from, right? If you can identify this is why I'm here, this is why God created me, what my intention is in life, and what my experiences in life brought me to, then you can actually have a fulfilling life.
Right.
So I just wanted to nutshell that. But the conversation I'm having this time, which wasn't planned, it was just this is interesting, let's talk about it, because we're interested in the same thing. What can we bring into our discussion that people can look forward to? So if you're listening and you're like, oh, I got a great idea, because this is how we all help each other.
Sure.
Tell us, how else we know, and we want to do the same for you, especially me, because I like to talk and do all that. Do. Well, I have a feeling that you have some of the similar gifts, which means in purpose for me, it's to teach and mentor other people, other individuals, so they can make an impact in the lives of those they influence, right? So it's that way, when I teach people and help people, I'm hoping that they can learn to do the same or something different that helps more people. And then I'm every time I'm in a situation where I'm talking with somebody and I get that little entrepreneur thing that goes off in my head, alarms going off, and I'm like, hey, I got a great idea.
Right.
And I want to share that. And the other person, if they're receptive, are that's cool, I'll read that book. We're kind of nerds.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
We like to like read and research and listen to Audible books and listen to podcasts and what have you. All the things.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say that's a goal in any interaction or specifically one-on-ones that I have with people. It's
awesome.
Do I know somebody that you should know, or kind of what's plaguing you, right? What's that number one problem you have right now? Do I have some ideas that might help? Never to
Yeah.
say this is what you should do, but
Yeah.
more of this is what I would do or this is what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
Not for them to turn around and do literally what I'm saying, but just to maybe get their brain on a different track, thinking about it differently. That is ultimately how
I like
try
that.
to contribute to one-on-ones is by doing that. Either like, hey, you should be doing a podcast. Let me connect you with, Tim and Sadie. Or it's, you know, have you thought about da 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 da? In my corporate experience, we did this, this, and this, and it seemed to really help, like that type of stuff. So, one thing that I was giving out for a little while is, and Christina and I talked about this, the ADKAR model. And so ADKAR is a corporate, I'm sure it's branded and copyright and all that stuff, but it's a change model. So when you go through big changes at corporations, you have a lot of pushback, right, from people that don't
like change.
like change. And that's all of us, right? Our bodies are designed to prevent change, essentially. And so ADKAR stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement. And so if you're trying to change, whether you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to be more successful in your business, the first thing you need to do is be aware that there's a problem and you have to change it. And a lot of times I think people give advice when that person is not at awareness yet. You're at awareness for them, right? Hey,
Yeah, you
Garrett,
see a problem that they obviously
They're not
have.
ready.
Yeah. That happened to me twice one week, in the same day, of course. Two different business owners. One was a web developer, and I was like, "Oh, you got to go check out this guy and his book and his class because it's like it's like your whole career. You don't know about it." And I like realized afterwards I was kind of being an asshole. Because to me, I'm just passionate about it, and I'm like, oh, vomiting of the mouth, right? I'm like, you gotta check this out. And the other guy I was with was like, yeah, I've been to his 3-day seminar, and it was just like we were both like, and she was like looking at me like I was, like Sherry says this, which is you're being a dickhead, right? So I was totally being an.
What are how's the FCC doing? Are they cracking down on us?
Oh yeah, I'm sure I could. Whatever, it'll happen down the
think
road.
there's
We'll have to
worse out there.
bleep it at some point. Whatever.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah. So,
But
yeah, or it's like, when you tell somebody like, oh, you've got to go see this show on Netflix. Well, if you're not in the space where you're looking for new Netflix recommendations, it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, sounds great. But you're thinking like, okay, like get over it, right?
Yeah.
But if you go on Facebook and you say, hey, my wife and I are looking for a new
Show
Netflix episode, then suddenly the recommendations feel different, right?
Yeah.
And that's because you're at D, which is desire.
Yeah.
So you want to make a change and you have the desire to make the change. Now you're ready for the advice, which is the knowledge about how to do it and having the actual ability to do it. And so I think a lot of times where people get stuck is they're not listening to advice because they haven't sort of self-admitted the problem to create the awareness for themselves, and then they don't want to really fix it. They might say they want to, but until you really want to, then that advice just doesn't land. But if you're there, and if you can get somebody there first, then those great nuggets you have next are going to be a lot more impactful in terms of knowledge and ability. And then reinforcement is just to make sure that you don't go back to your old habits. Usually in a corporate model, it's putting some sort of system in place to make sure that you can't kind of slip back.
Yeah.
But that's ultimately that reinforcement piece. So you think of somebody that goes through all the effort, they lose a bunch of weight, they're feeling really, really good. At some point, people stop saying, oh my God, you look great, because now you look the way you always do because you've been that weight for a year. And suddenly that reinforcement's gone. That's maybe where you're at risk then, versus if everybody told you every day, like, hey, you lost 60 pounds, you're still looking great, you'd be more likely to keep it off. That's a lot of burden on everybody else to keep saying it to you. But the odds of you staying and not slipping back goes up with that reinforcement, because we all need those positive words of affirmation and stuff like that. So that's just one example of something that it came up in like a project that I was working on sort of separate from my day job.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, like my one-on-ones that week or my conversations that week, it seemed to make sense. And so I think I shared it like 5 different times that week because the theme was there.
And sometimes that happens, right? Like, I don't know how this is, but like last week when we were at church, the pastor was talking about like what things like burnout, things that cause burnout and like overwork and not, like in the Bible, they talk about Sabbath, right? And so we kind of like take that for granted, but it's really saying you need time to rest and rejuvenate, because if you don't, you're going to hurt yourself emotionally and then just dry up your well. Your cup is not going to be full because you're just emptying it all the time. And I was like, how is this possible? Like Angela and I are sitting there next to each other going, this is what I've been feeling for like the last couple of weeks or whatever, and like trying to figure out what the definition of what I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and there it is. It's ready for you, or being presented when you're ready, So the next question is, how have you ever thought about how you can help people to create awareness? I mean, ultimately, you can't choose what somebody's going to choose, but are there questions we can ask? I'm trying to think of ways to positively influence people, because it hurts us to see other people just heading down that road. We have family, we have friends, most of society, just like with the theme of our podcast, they're the antithesis of it. Most of the society is just floating through life. They get to a point where either it's college or just jobs that have led them to the place where they're at. And the only thing that would cause them to get a new job is if they lose the one they currently have. Right? That happened to you?
Guilty as charged.
Oh, tell us all about it.
Nice segue. This was completely unplanned, by the way. Yeah, so I graduated college. I was a engineering major because my girlfriend in high school's older sister, her boyfriend, who was a year older than me, so he went to college a year before I did, he was an engineering major, and I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Okay.
I had no real sense of what majors were and what jobs they led to. And so I was like, oh, well, he's smart. Engineering sounds cool. And so I became an engineering major. I went to the college that my sister went to because it was 45 minutes from home, and I just didn't have, it was a good school, but I just didn't, I didn't have this grand sense of like, this is where my life is headed. So all I did was look to people near me, right, to see what they did, and I just basically did a lot of the same stuff. And so I got out of school and I had a job and a couple of jobs. Anyway, right around that time, my father, who owned a restaurant for years, his restaurant was forced to move from a 200-year-old house, low ceiling, square bar, fireplace. Everybody loved it. It was kind of off the beaten path, into basically a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a deli. And so the place that's there now is actually really expensive and successful, but my dad's place was more like burgers and chops and steaks and, a lot of people hanging out at the bar and having a good time. So the business model didn't fit, and, he didn't see that opportunity to switch, which is fine. But long story short, entrepreneur for years, kept most of his money in the business, didn't really create like a retirement account for himself. This is going to be important later. So ultimately sold the business at a loss, became a car salesman, and there wasn't much to show for the 20 plus years that he was a restaurant owner, essentially.
Yeah.
And so, so that certainly scared me a little bit. Not that I'm him or that I make the same decisions, but when you see one of your parents do that. And then at the same time, my mom was, a stay-at-home mom, and she worked part-time at the restaurant when my dad had it. And then after they divorced, she had to obviously get a job. And so she ultimately started working for State Farm. Her two sisters also worked there. So by the time it was all said and done, my dad became ill and homebound and didn't even get a chance to enjoy retirement. And my mom slowly worked her way up through the company, got 2 or 3 promotions, got a raise and a bonus every year because it's a Fortune 50 company. It's one of the few companies that still has a pension. And at the end of the day, she retires with a pension and Social Security, and she's doing okay financially. So I got on with them, and I was like, well, this is it. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, even though every day, like you talk about purpose, every day I woke up, something didn't feel right. Typical just corporate bureaucracy, right? I mean, there's a lot of people looking at what you're doing. You're expected to do certain things and act a certain way. And even if you have this great idea that's kind of out there, that's sort of like, no, kind of stay in your lane. So, I mean, the work was fun and I got to do some good things, but it was still limiting to some extent. But again, then once a year, you get a piece of paper with your raise and your bonus on it, and you kind of just get over it. You go in, you look at your pension calculator, and you see how it's accruing. You look at your 401k, and you see how that's accruing. And so eventually you're like, yeah, you know what? Stop being so whiny, right? And like, what are you complaining about? With State Farm, I had a chance to relocate. So I grew up in Long Island. I moved to upstate New York and Tampa, Florida, and Atlanta, Georgia, and central Illinois, and then Tacoma in 2013. So I had a chance to move around. I got a raise and a bonus every year. And so same thing, I just, whether or not that was my purpose, I sort of squashed that notion, looked for, purpose, I guess, outside of work, but ultimately just dealt with it because, again, the
That's
benefits
life,
and the
right?
pay were good, right?
Yeah.
And so why would I get off this track,
That's secure.
that's
That's-
running pretty good,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because the thing we used to always say, like everybody that worked at State Farm, is, well, at least we have job security. Like the worst thing that will happen is you'll have to relocate to keep your job. That was always the worst case scenario. You'd have to go somewhere else. And in the last couple of years, they had hubs in Atlanta, Dallas, and Phoenix. Okay. Well, I've had friends over time sort of disseminate. There's about 10,000 people in each location. I've lived in Atlanta. I've been to Dallas numerous times, and I've been to Phoenix a few times. So all of those are I'm okay with all of those, right? So I was prepared again to just keep going down this path. And so in 2016, when I switched jobs, I became, still within State Farm, I became a virtual telecommuter. I was working for State Farm Bank. We were trying to disrupt the mortgage industry, so we were doing cool stuff. We filed for some patents. We were designing an app. So I was finally doing a job that felt kind of freeing. The reins were off a little bit. So I was thinking like, okay, I found the one job within State Farm that kind of takes care of that weird feeling.
Excites you a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sure enough, 7 months later, bank president retires, new guy starts, launches a structure study, shuts down all non-compliance work, and you can see where this is headed since I work for New York Life. So basically, all telecommuters in a couple other areas just were let go.
Just gone.
4.5 months notice, which is nice, and severance, which is also nice, but ultimately just let go. And so so that sends you to the couch or the park or wherever you do your best thinking, the toilet, and you just time to just think about who am I and what do I want to do. And so again, the idea of working in finance and helping people plan their future and stuff, my skill that I always had was problem solving, and that's really all it is. It's looking at the numbers and effectively problem solving. And so I just kind of had to come to Jesus. I said, all right, I'm going to go for this, even though my past told me avoid commission jobs, avoid being an entrepreneur, right? Crave that steady paycheck. It was time to jump and just go for it, essentially. So
What year was that?
that was last year, I guess it's 2020 now, so 2018, so 15 months ago, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you feel more fulfilled doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So my day is filled with, seeing all you wonderful people in networking meetings, right? And setting appointments and meeting with people and families that I want to meet with.
Yeah.
Hosting a podcast, right? When
Yeah.
are you going to find time to do that during your 9 to 5, right? I guess you could get done and show up here at 5:30, 6 o'clock and do it, but that sounds painful.
Yep.
It's one of those things where, I mean, you can do it, right? And
Yeah.
you do it, but you're deep down, you're like, that's right. You're worn out from a week of doing stuff is what it is. And then you're trying to find that energy to do the other things. And I hosted trivia for a couple of years and stuff. So, I mean, I've done some of those extracurriculars to sort of fill that need, but at the same time, it can be exhausting on top of that, 9 to 5. So, so, I mean, just completely different. I even won a contract with the state recently to do some work. There's a project out there. It's basically like a data transition project, and I'll save you the details, but I'm able to take that on because I now make my own schedule.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so the liberating feeling that comes knowing that you're where you want to be is pretty nice. The only time during my week that I spend that maybe I'm not where I want to be would just be the office is in Bellevue, so every Monday I got to sit in traffic for almost 2 hours to get up there, and then about 90 minutes coming back. That's really the only time that, in my
For like
ideal
a
world,
weekly meeting? Or?
yeah, basically, like a staff meeting, and that's
Yeah.
just for the first couple of years of being with New York Life. The content itself, once you're there, is great, and I get to meet with my partner and talk strategy and all that stuff. So that's all good. It's literally just the traffic that I would gladly, give up. But so that's not too bad, right? So from a 40-hour week job where you're like, some of my projects excite me. I like the people I work with, but at the end of the day, the crux of the work is very sort of unfulfilling. It's directed by your boss and your boss's boss and your boss's boss's boss, and it doesn't seem to be the thing that's going to get it done, but it's what you're told to work on, to now, what is that, 3.5 hours a week that I'm kind of like, that's not really what I want to do. I think that's a pretty good trade-off. So,
And we all have some chores that we have to do, right? Like if you equate that to like washing the dishes
Yeah.
or doing the laundry at home, and not like fits in the morning laundry. Did you ever listen? Oh, okay. Sadie knows what I'm talking about apparently. There was an old show on country radio station, Fits in the Morning, and doing laundry was him and his wife's way of talking about the. like we're gonna go do the laundry, so the kids wouldn't know what they're talking about. So,
Yeah.
but anyways, we all have chores that we
Yeah.
have to do that we don't want to do, in home stuff or even at work. Like even when you're self-employed or you're running your own business, obviously you want to work towards finding ways to not have to do those things, right? But ultimately, there's just stuff that we have to do
Yeah.
because it's our responsibility.
And there's always going to be something you don't like as much. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like to be on the phone. I hate calling people. But it's just what you have to do. And
Right.
you do it. Because it fulfills your purpose in the end.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's a
Totally.
task in the
Yeah.
whole thing.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I mean, would I love 100% schedule where I love every minute? Sure, but
That's not really
yeah,
real
but,
life.
but
right?
getting it down to less than 10% of the time spent kind of doing the unfortunate stuff that, I mean, that's, like I said, I mean, that's pretty good. So, I mean, that's the shift that has occurred over the last year and a half, just in terms of my time and in terms of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And then just having the freedom that if I have a sub purpose that I want to chase, like I still have that freedom and that liberty to chase it, where again, that gets harder and it can be tiring trying to do the 40-hour work job
Yeah.
and then chase your passion when you're done doing that. Right. So,
But you have more energy when you're doing something that you're really interested
do.
in and passionate about and fulfilling.
yeah.
Yep.
So, I just want to jump in real quick.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I talked to my team partner this morning, and she's in Germany. And I had to arrange some things because I have a webinar afterwards. And she's like, that's so much like stress, and are you okay? And I'm like, you know what? It's my purpose. So you can give me 10 meetings in a row like that and me driving all over the place. I would love to do that rather than do the 8 hours at a job I don't like.
Yeah.
So like you said, you get more energy doing that once you find that. Like it's crazy.
right.
Yeah. And being with people you love, you end up
Yeah.
getting more energy when it's like a focused thing where you're actually doing it with intention, and it's just crazy when you actually love what you're doing, whether it be a relationship with somebody or work that gives you fulfillment and purpose, or where you're serving other people. Because when you step up and you serve other people, all of a sudden you might like not want to go do this thing, but you're like, well, I said I'd be there. So you go and you do it, and then all of a sudden you're like helping, Luana at the soup kitchen or whatever it is, and you're like, I thought I was going to fall asleep on the way here.
Right.
And you're just like, it's like you're watching football or your favorite team. Because, like I watched Dallas on Thanksgiving and I think I slept for the first half of the game. That was a hit at my fiance because she loves Dallas. But I always kind of like sneak them in there.
Right.
And Angela, of course.
Yes.
So what about people? What would you give advice to people? Like you were thrown into this situation.
Yes.
Like you didn't have a choice.
Right.
How would you advise people to make a transition into doing something that's what they love?
I would say probably keep a calendar and just mark a little note, put a little J maybe if you thought about jumping, and then go back and look. And if there's enough J's there, because we're all going to have a bad day, right? You can
Oh, yeah.
you
Yeah.
can love your company and what you do, and things could backfire, appointment could cancel, something could happen. You could, one of your customers could come back to you and demand a refund because something got right. All these things can go wrong, and you could be like, "Why am I doing this?" Like
Yeah.
we're all going to have that.
That moment, that hour, that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how consistent is it? So if you feel like you're starting to have it, I would say, just start jotting that down so you can go back and look. And if over 90 days,
There's a
you've
lot
got
of that.
85 J's for jump, it might be time to scratch that itch a little bit and start to explore it find a confidant, find a mentor, like go grab coffee and just talk about what it would look like. Play hypothetical games. Say, okay, you got fired tomorrow. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And just see what you can find. And I say that because I didn't do that. I felt it often, but again, because of some of the circumstances, I kept telling myself,
It's
I'm
okay.
crazy to give it up. Why would I give up, a 6-figure salary and a pension, all this? Like, that's just stupid. Like, who would do that? There's people that would die to have my job. Like, why would I give that up? But now in hindsight, now that I'm on the other side of it, I wish I'd done it sooner, because then instead of being still kind of like a first, second year entrepreneur where the years are tough and you're trying to piece it together, I could be in year 7 or 8 and thriving, which is where I'll be ultimately, but I could have been there already
Yeah.
if I would have just jumped sooner. And so that's the thing. It's one of those things where there's never necessarily a good time, but there's never a bad time either. So I guess that would be my advice, would be to start putting it to paper. You could journal too while you're there. Start journaling the things that you want to do, because that's the hard part too, is figuring out, I know this isn't it. I just don't know exactly what it looks like. So it might take time to explore that as well. But if you just start committing to it and talking about it, that whole, concept of, you get what you put into the universe and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, if you're able to put it out there and write it down, and then again, just some sort of calendar where you're marking the days will help you realize, like, oh, I'm pretty miserable because 85 out of 90 days I said that I'm not doing what I should be doing.
Yeah.
At some point that should eat at you enough to make you say, hey,
Yeah.
this is it. Today's the day, right?
I think that's an awesome advice to do
Yeah.
that. Do that, people, please do that. But also what you said, to write it down, like journal. And I would challenge you to not write down what you want, because a lot of people don't know what they want. They have no idea what's out there. Write down what you don't like, specifically what you didn't like, and then what you like will come out of it eventually. But a lot of
makes
people
sense.
don't do that because they're like writing it down, and then writing it down, it's going to manifest. No. It's not going to work like that. But you have to be aware what you don't like first.
Yeah.
To figure out what you do like.
Yep.
I love that. Because, if you ask most people, like, well, if you could do anything tomorrow and get paid the same salary no matter what would you do? A lot of
Sit on
people
the couch.
Yeah,
It's like you will
Yes.
be way more miserable in about a month. If you
drink
do that.
beers at the tiki bar, right? Like, yeah.
There's actually, I asked that question, a friend of mine, and she's like, well, if I could do anything, I would be a millionaire and lay on the beach. I'm like, I challenge you on that. I don't think you would do that, because in the sentence before that, she's a nurse and she likes to help people, right? She's like, oh, I help people and I like to go to the older people and get them set up. And, I'm like, see, you wouldn't just lay on the beach and do nothing.
Right.
Because you
Right.
hear stories about people that sell their businesses for $100 million or whatever, I'm making up the number. And 6 months later, after laying on a beach for 6 months, they're like depressed. They're like, what do I do now? This was cool. Like, there was a novelty to it. Like, I just worked for 70 years, 60 years, whatever, 40 years, whatever it is, to get to this point. And now I'm doing it. But it's not really, they never did the self-discovery of figuring out what makes them tick, what their why is.
Right.
A lot of people worked for whatever company it was. I kind of always felt like, and this will be interesting if you listen to us, my uncle was disappointed in me because this is the story I tell myself, right? So I would love it if he corrected me and be like, I heard your podcast, you SOB. That's not what I think. Please be that. But I always thought like that he thinks like I'm being a piece of shit, right? Because I didn't do what would make sense to him, right? Like, he retired as the president of Dillard's. And I think my hypothesis is that he sees in me the skill sets that he had. And just like, why didn't you just stick with the big company from college on? Like, you were working at Home Depot, why didn't you do the management track? You'd be like a regional vice president by now, or that kind of thing, right? It's like, because you have what it takes. Instead, starting my own business, living on like pennies, right? And it's taking like 9 years to start to be able to pay myself like what I used to make, like not even what I used to make 10 years ago,
Right.
12 years ago. It's like I make less than that now, but most of that's because you reinvest. A couple $100,000 coming in is not a lot of money when you have a whole business to support. It's like, people think, oh, you're a roofer, you make a lot of money. It's like, well, I also have a lot of equipment and tools and overhead and insurance and, all of that stuff. But so he, I think, and again, that's a story I tell myself, thinks that this is the wrong decision, to do that. But I would do this over again. In fact, like you said, I would have done it earlier.
Right.
It's like when I was in college, again, oh gosh, this might get me in trouble, but it was so long ago, so who cares? There's probably statute of limitations. I bought and sold software wholesale. Like literally, I found a guy that I was selling software to, and he would sell licensing in big packages because he'd have like the numbers on them. I don't think he even really needed the box. It was just like bulk, right? And so I got like all his pricing from him because I went and did this like software test thing that somebody told me about at Microsoft, whatever. And I walked away with this piece of software and sold it for like $300. And I was like 2 hours, made $300 as a college student.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a week worth of work, right? It was like, this is insane. And so I got a credit card from my dad with like a $10,000 limit. And I was buying and selling software wholesale. And in like 5 hours a week, I was making like $1,800 to $2,000 a month, right? And that was in my mid-20s. It's like, so I haven't always been like the Gary Vee, like selling lemonade or whatever. But like if something like would like a light bulb would go off, I'd be like, ooh, I'm jumping on that and finding it, right? It's like, oh, I wish I had like a mentor back then that says, hey, you got the thing that makes you want to like do stuff and create ideas and build a business. And even like today, people have like all these resources where it's like they can actually discover. It's like, oh, I really am fascinated by that. And they can go and try stuff.
Right.
So I guess the moral of the story is try early
Yeah.
and often.
Yes.
And another thing I did was at one point at like 30, I had a friend and we were selling vitamins, like one of those multi-level marketing companies, but we just did it online. And he was like a software engineer, so he created like the back end stuff for a website and taught me how to do CSS scripting. And I taught myself search engine optimization and Google AdWords and did all that stuff that people want me to pay them thousands of dollars a month to do now, which is fine because I don't want to do it anymore. You can only do so much stuff, right? You can't.
Sure.
You can't. There's like 40 hats you can wear as a business owner, and you can't do it all.
Right.
Right. So I like digress there for a split second, but nonetheless, I created a side business that ended up making it for like a year and a half, 2 years. I just didn't work. I went golfing and shooting. At least sometimes I do both in the same day, like or play Xbox. And it was like I was working like 10, 12 hours in a week. And never even occurred to me what would do now. Like if I could make $4,000 a month now at 10 hours a week, I'd be like, how do I 10 times this?
Right.
Like if I spend the $7,000 coming in and it's only costing me $1,000 in AdWords, what if I spent the full $7,000 on advertising? What would that, like, that's what would go through my mind now, but then I wasn't ready for it.
You're just like, sweet, it's time to go golfing. Right? Yeah.
I can pay my basic bills because I have almost none now, right? And I could just go golfing like 3-4 days a week or shooting or go to the coffee shop every day. Victor's, have you been there? Oh, it's a really good coffee shop in Redmond, but that's where like all the Microsoft people are. And that's where I lived up there. But that being said, people like we talked about, they weren't, I wasn't, was it awareness? What's the first thing on that list?
Yeah.
Awareness.
I wasn't aware that there was more out there or thinking about the future.
Right.
I was just like, oh, this is easy. And is that what people are feeling now? Like, do they are at the job, they're like, this is pretty easy. I'm working 40 hours a week. They might complain like 40 hours is a lot. And, I go on a tantrum about that because you have 168 hours in the week. There's a lot of time in the week. But nonetheless, they're like, hey, this is like what I'm used to. I don't want to push myself any farther. I don't want to work an extra 15 hours a week on my side hustle and not see any results from it.
Right.
I've heard people that are like, I spent, 6 or 8 hours a week for 6 months or whatever, and it only made me an extra $150 or $200 a month. And it's like, they don't understand, or maybe they just don't conceptualize that like 10,000 hour to become a professional concept.
Right.
Right. And it's like, so if you spent 90 hours in 6 months working on something, why do you have the expectation that you're going to make the money that someone who spent 40,000 hours?
Right.
That person spent 40,000 hours, but they don't know it because they just see the guy that's at the top of the game making $30,000 a month doing a multi-level marketing health benefit thing. They're like, that person's amazing. They must have got lucky.
Or overnight success.
Overnight success that took 17 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause that's the average overnight success. It's like 17 and a half years, right? And so it's like they see that where the person's just like sitting in their beautiful home doing, videos and stuff all the time, but they don't ever know that they sacrificed. Maybe they had a spouse and they didn't have to work, but they were working 60, 70 hours a week with small children, sacrificing to make that business come into a reality.
Right.
In like 5 years, they didn't, and they're probably still putting 60, 70 hours a week, making the 20 grand a month. Right.
Right.
They just think, oh, all they care about is money or whatever. And it's like I'm frustrated by it because it's like, you have to put in the work, especially if it's a side hustle, if you want the difference. And Gary Vaynerchuk talks about like, if you're satisfied, whatever, making the 6 figures, working at the job, you get to be a softball league, do whatever. You love what you do. You get to spend time with your family. It's all good. You're not complaining.
Go for it.
I'm not disparaging you. And I love that he says that. But if you're doing that and you complain all the time that you don't have enough making $86,000 a year and that things aren't working out the way you want, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, whose fault is that?
Right.
We all can take action, and there's a lot more time in the week.
Yeah.
So, and then we all fail too, and it's micro failures like we talked about with Micah. It's like we all have setbacks or times where you just don't feel like you're in the groove.
Sure.
But that's okay. We're human.
Right.
So just like acknowledge that wherever you're at and look at where you want to be. Do you have any like New Year's resolutions?
No, but it just that last thing you said, like that's some of the advice I get in New York Life. They're like, you're going to probably want to quit 3 to 4 times your first year, probably like 6 or 8 times your second year. Then it goes back down to like 3 or 4 your third year.
Yeah.
And then by year 4, for the most part, you kind of get over it, right? And you're like, I'm cool. So yeah, it's those micro failures. And yeah, there's definitely days where I'm like, man, what I wouldn't give to just have a paycheck that comes every other week.
Yeah.
I was helping my girlfriend Destiny. We're working on buying a house and we're looking at budget stuff, and it's really nice when you say, okay, here's the pot of money that's going to come, just figure out where it needs to go. Is a whole lot easier than I don't know how big the pot of money is. And one month it's going to be really big and the next month it's going to be really small, and you're going to have to plan around that. Like that is way more difficult. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely days where you kind of feel like a failure or, something falls through or whatever. And then you're questioning, what am I doing?
Did I make the wrong? Is my uncle right all along?
Yeah, yeah,
right. Because you go that corporate route, but I think that the corporate route is great. It does have a sense of security, but not so much. Like you were going to your job today, going, "Am I going to have a job when I leave?"
Yeah, like my boss was just let go and nobody knows why, and they say they're transparent.
Yeah, so it's like
It's not secure.
And you thought your career was like as secure as it gets.
Yep.
Right. So
if
it's
I want to be there till the end, I will be there to the end. Yep.
Yep. So there's not more security in working for somebody else than working for yourself. Right. It's just there is definitely the innate like you don't know what you're going to make every month. Right. So you have to be more disciplined and in like dealing with bills and what have you.
Yep.
And planning ahead. And I just heard a really wise man say today, make like 80% of your income before you quit to go into your side hustle. And I've heard other people say, make 100% of your income and have 6 months in reserves, Yep. But if you can make 80% of your income and have other resources like a spouse that's going to be able to supplement that or what have you, when you make that shift, like if you gross 7,000 a month, then you're like, whatever 80% of that is, what would 8 times 7, 5,600. So if you can make 5,600 a month through your side hustle after, even if it took like 7 years,
right?
Why is there a timeline?
Yeah,
we only put that on ourselves, and if you're like, I want it to be in 2 years and it takes 4, is it really that bad?
Assuming your side hustle is your true passion and your purpose, right? Then of course.
Yeah.
If your side hustle makes you as miserable as your former main hustle,
then what's the point?
Different story, right? But if that's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning.
If you love baseball and baseball card collecting and you're like, hey, this is coming back, let me start buying and selling these things again. And I mean, it could be anything, right? Your Star Wars person. I was trying to not be offensive because there's a lot of Star Wars fans out there. I like it too, but not as much as them, right? But whatever it is, if you can make that into your thing and end up creating a business out of it, and then work on figuring out what it's going to take to make that happen. Right. And if it fails,
it fails, yeah. But a lot of people are scared because if it hasn't been done before, they're like, oh, I can't do it. Or I don't know how to go about it, you know?
Oh, you said something earlier, Rich, that kind of made me think about that, which is asking for advice or at least sharing what you're thinking of.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that at the time, and then we went down a couple different tracks. I just wanted to check on the time. We have a lot of people in our lives that we can get advice from, and it's not always the best advice, right? So maybe look for advice from people that appear to be doing what you want to do, at least, because at least they have the intention, right? Versus like the mom that says you should only be doing the career thing, you know, because what she's doing is she's probably saying that because she wants to protect you and wants you to be safe and doesn't want you to be like living on the street, like you're going to live on the street.
Right.
It's like, you know, I'll have to sell some of my stocks or whatever, but I'll be okay because I'm investing in the long term.
Right.
But they don't see that. They just say like, oh, if you can't make your mortgage payment, you're done. And you're like, Mom, if I can't make my mortgage payment, then I'll pull some of the $100,000 line of credit that I have to make it, which is not the right direction to go. That's like backwards, but I'm not going to lose my house. Right. But that's their fear. Right. So if you ask somebody who you know has a tendency to live in fear, you're going to not get the answer that's going to help you to grow. And if you ask somebody who's a successful business person, they'll tell you how much shit they had to eat to make it to where they're at.
Right.
When you're just like, oh, that guy makes 6 figures or 7 figures. You know, if you actually talk to, you know, like Brian Harding or something, he'll probably, I mean, I haven't talked to him about it, but I know he's successful in his plumbing business. He'll probably tell you a bunch of crap that he had to go through to get there.
Yeah.
Like, because every business person that I know has suffered and sacrificed a lot to make that success happen. And even other ones that are like aspiring to success or just starting to get success, they can tell you, like I could tell you about, you know, 7-8 years of really sacrificing, you know, doing not what I'd want to do, all with the intention to be able to build something for myself and for others. And so, in other words, yeah, talk to a bunch of people about it, but think about who you're talking to because it could hurt
Absolutely,
more than help. Yeah.
Yeah, I think of the number one agent in our office who's been the number one agent in all of New York Life in, I think it was like 2016 or 2017. And she was number 2 the year before she was number 1. She took 10 years just to qualify for our lowest council level, which is, you know, we have different incentives because we're in a business for ourselves. So to keep us motivated, there's different like levels that you can get to and stuff. And took her 10 years. Now she's revered. She walks in the office. She's, you know, basically everyone knows like when there's like a conference, like she gets the table front and center with the second most successful agent in our office. And like that's, you know, she's well respected, revered. Everybody reaches out to her for advice. Took her 10 years to get to that. Now she lives like over near, well, yeah, I won't say where she lives, but she lives in a very nice area and like all this stuff and has tremendous success. And you see, you know, how she's doing and it's impressive. And again, the number one agent in the entire company a year after being number 2. That's all based on first year commission. So you got to start over. That's not just, well, since you're there, you're already there. You got to step up and do it again. And she did it, you know, 2, 3, she's top 10, top 15 this year too. But again, she could have given up anywhere along the way because even that lowest level really isn't.
It's not enough to pay the bills.
It's not very sustainable. Yeah. I mean, it probably would be like okay. You'd probably get by just fine if you just hit that lowest level kind of every year because you get other renewals and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, it's not. You're not thriving. You're doing okay. You're not thriving. And so yeah, she could have given up in year 2. She could get given up in year 5, year 8, year 9. Year 10, she finally hits it, and now I'm not exactly sure what year she's in now, but I'm sure she's happy that she, you know, stuck with it. And, you know, since we're talking about like mindset and stuff like that, one of the things that it's a class that she teaches from the Pacific Institute. It's called Thought Patterns for High Performance. And it gets into how the subconscious works. And so just to summarize it real briefly, the gist is that, and you guys may have heard of some of this stuff, but your subconscious has this self-image of who you are, and it tries to keep you there.
Yeah.
So if your subconscious says you're scared of heights and you start walking towards that ledge, your body's going to kick in some anxiety and try to keep you off that ledge because you're not that daredevil person, right? You're that safe person. And so your brain is constantly regulating to that image. So your reticular activating system is trying to keep you whatever that image is. And so if you tell yourself you're not an entrepreneur, guess what? Your brain's going to keep feeding you information. But what it talks about is that if you're able to use different techniques of visualization and affirmations and all these things to replace that image with the image of who you want to be, your brain won't know the difference.
Yep.
And then what it'll do is it'll start feeding you information, and that's way more productive. That's why people in the shower will have that aha, because their subconscious was trying to figure out that problem that's been bugging you. And then when your brain's doing other things like, things you've done a million times, you're brushing your teeth, your subconscious is still working on that problem. You fed it. And then all of a sudden it's like, eureka, I got it. And that's where people all of a sudden are like, they smack their head and they say, oh, I finally figured it out. It's because you set your subconscious to work. And so that's a lot of the techniques that I know she used. And I took that class last February and just absolutely loved it. And it's been a big difference maker for me too. But yeah, just having that belief in yourself and that visualization of this is who I'm going to be, and using present tense talk as though you're already there becomes a catalyst for actually getting yourself where you want to be. And all of a sudden little ideas will pop up and, little things. Oh, you know what? I haven't talked to so-and-so, but I know that they know so-and-so, and that would actually be a really good contact for me. When you're thinking, I need a new job because this isn't working, your brain's not going to see that. But when you're thinking, I'm a successful agent, I just haven't found the right set of clients yet, then all of a sudden something magical like that happens and you realize like, oh, so-and-so knows so-and-so. You ask them for the meeting and they say, well, of course, Rich, I'd love to help you out. Like, let me introduce you to, and then that turns into whatever it might turn into. And so I think that's a technique that she's used. And so I think that that's probably good advice for people too. Just that belief in yourself and that visualization about, that's why they have like dream boards or whatever they're called, where you put a picture.
Yeah, do you have one of those?
Of course.
Hang.
Did you ever do the dream board thing, or?
I haven't. I did one exercise as part of that class where I wrote down like 15 or 16 things that I'd like to do in my lifetime. And then I kind of like tucked it away for later so I can see how I did. I haven't done the actual where you like draw pictures or cut things out of like magazines and do that kind of stuff. But I might need to now.
I think
Maybe
I
that's my
probably
resolution.
do too. Yeah, we're gonna be challenged.
I'll come back
now,
on and we can show each other our,
we
our
should
dream
do that.
board.
Let's do it.
So.
There's something that you and I need to work on too. Gratitude.
Yes.
We talked about with another host or another guest that was on, actually texting each other or messaging each other once a day, like, this is what I'm grateful for. And we started off doing that for a while, and it was like trying to do like 3 things a day that we're grateful for. And the idea is to do like one thing we're grateful for and then 3 to 5 reasons why we're grateful for that, because gratitude, you can't be sitting in like depression and the woe is me thing if you're sitting in the emotion and existence of gratitude. So you can reshift your mind towards that.
Yeah.
The other thing that I do is exactly what you were talking about for subconscious, which is pretty much, unless I forget, but 98% of the time, every morning and every night, I read like a vision statement, which for like the last 3-4 months or something. And what it is it's developed too. Like, it's been rewritten a few times, words have been added to it, what have you, because it's like our vision statement. And the first thing on it is to learn how to be a leader and help others to do the same. To continuously improve my leadership skills and help others do the same.
Okay.
And then it's like key words like gratitude and forgiveness and like all these words that I read every day. And then it's like some like innate goals that I'm talking about as like in the now, like to complete 50 roofs a month with $150,000 gross profit.
Okay.
And I believe that I will be there by the end of the year.
Right.
I say that I am completing 50 roofs a month with $150,000 gross profit as my like second statement. And I just read through those things. And what I'm doing is trying to reprogram my mind and give myself that positive affirmation. So when I go to bed and when I wake up, it's the first thing that's there
There,
and live in it.
There's I went through that what you just said 5 years ago, 4 years ago, because I didn't believe in myself and doing all of that. So figuring out, it's one of the first things I tell people too, like if they want to make a change in their lifestyle, they have to want it. They have to be able to envision it to be able to do it, right? I didn't believe that I'm an entrepreneur. Nobody in my family is. But now thinking back, my grandpa was, and I didn't even think about him. He was right there. I was living next to him, right? So you have to figure out how to persuade yourself or believe in yourself that you can do that before you can make those affirmations then. Because if you make those affirmations like, oh, I'm a millionaire, you're going to laugh at yourself because you're not believing in yourself first to get there. So there are different steps to take, but affirmations are great, especially if you have them everywhere in your house.
Oh, that's really good too.
Do you have them everywhere in your house?
I'm really annoying, yes.
Yeah.
On the mirror in the bathroom with the marker?
Everywhere,
Perfect.
yeah.
Everywhere.
And maybe that's why I'm not saying I'm completing 500 roofs a month, you know, with $1.5 million, because I don't maybe believe that yet.
Well, that's the thing, right? It should be a stretch, but if it's too far of a stretch, right? If I'm expecting to be in the NFL tomorrow or on the PGA Tour, you're probably stretching to the point that your brain doesn't waste its time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Versus, if you put it just out of reach, your brain will go with it.
And I'm actually have, when you break down like goals and like things that I'm doing, like I guess you would call them milestones, you know, like the milestones on like a graph that you're looking at. It's, you know, I have a plan to get to that point, you know, for the business part of it. And then there's another spot that Angela and I say is like that we own the property of our dreams and we do with it as we wish, you know, to build a starter home, our parents' homes, a barn, our dream home, and rental cottages.
Gotcha.
Right? And that's like one of the things that we say, and that could take 5 years.
Right.
But we're like saying it because it's like, you know, that's what we're affirming too. And I really want to encourage people to like, you don't have to do that, but it would be great if you did. It could be just like 2 things, but you don't have to 100% believe in yourself to do an affirmation of where you want to be and say it like, this is what I am now. And it could be your first step.
But tip that really helped me personally is combine it with a feeling. Like what you're going to feel like when you achieve that.
Right.
Like for me, personally, one of the biggest things this year, not resolution, but like a goal, I want to do things that excite me. You know, if it doesn't excite me, then I'm like, might not want to, you know,
put the
follow through
effort
with
into doing it. Yeah.
So
what's yours? Well, you set yourself up for it.
You knew that was coming.
no.
I haven't spent a lot of time with Gary, but even I knew that was coming.
It's a lot. It's a long paragraph, but really being unstoppable in the pursuit of my goals that I've set for my different areas, and really focusing on being kind and serving others and figuring out how to do more of that. You know, being in that giving spirit and not expecting anything back.
Yeah, I love it. That's awesome. The thing that triggered for me that made me really like this class was the fact that some of that can feel sort of like voodoo magic, right? Like just believe in yourself and write it on your mirror, and 6 months later it'll happen. And so I know a lot of people don't prescribe to that, but that's where it helped to understand the science. Your subconscious is always going to be working. It's either working for you or against you. Yep. So if you have a negative self-image and you tell yourself you're not good enough, you're not this, you're not that, it's going to work. It's working. It's just working to reaffirm that.
Yeah, and it's trying to protect you.
It is.
Right. So you have to tell it otherwise.
Yes.
Yeah, that brings the change conversation back into the mix. Right. Because change, from an evolutionary perspective, change is bad. If we've been going to the same watering hole and feeding off the same animals smaller than us for 1 million years, and an animal twice our size comes running through, our brain says that's different and that's bad, run. And that keeps us alive. So yeah, that's the whole, from an evolutionary standpoint, that's why we don't like change, because our brain has to then figure out, is that change good? Is it bad? Is it scary? When nothing's changed, everything's cool. And so, yeah, if you just leave it alone, all your brain's going to do is just reaffirm exactly where you are. And then things are going to happen that keep you right there. And then you're going to tell yourself, well, see, look, I told you, you know, that kind of thing.
Exactly. That little voice.
Yeah. So it's working whether you want it to or not.
Yeah.
So if you feed it the affirmations and the visions of where you're trying to go, it's going to start working more positively and give you, you know, that dream that you're searching for, or that house you're searching for. It's going to find you that thing. Or it's going to find you the opportunity that might lead to that thing, right? You become friends with a guy who owns 1 million acres, and then he dies, and he, you know, wills you, you know, 30 acres near Mount Rainier, and you guys are all set, right? I mean, who knows?
You never know.
But yeah, if you're not feeding your subconscious the positive stuff of where you're trying to go, then it's still working. It doesn't just say, okay, cool, I'm good. It's going to keep working, but it's going to be reaffirming all the things you don't like about your life and your circumstances. So
Are you doing some of that for yourself?
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I have an app on my phone with affirmations and stuff, and some professional, some personal, and then just a general optimism that I think the next person I talk to is either going to want to do business, or they're going to know somebody that's going to want to do business. And I believe that even on the days where 2 people cancel and, you know, the pipeline looks like it's starting to dry up, I still believe the next person I talk to is going to produce, you know, a positive relationship in some way, shape, or form, whether it's doing business with them directly, or they know somebody that's a good referral, or whatever it is. I firmly believe that in every interaction, and try to follow Go Giver and do the same for them, and give them something, knowing that that's usually a much better way to expect karmic payoff than to just sit there and be like, you know, come to me. So I spend most of my time just taking on that Go Giver philosophy and trying to get it out there, knowing that it'll eventually come back at some point.
And the more that we serve others, hence the go-giver, the more we get back in the long run.
Right.
It's just not having the expectation. Because when you go into it like, if I help you, you have to help me, people can read through that all day long.
Oh.
Right.
You know? And I mean, you can read through it when someone does that to you, when you're like trying to go get something and the salesman's just like, you feel that like, thing. That's because that person's just so needing of it, versus like, hopefully we're all at the point in our life when we're like, you know what, if they don't choose me, that's okay.
Right.
And I really believe that. And sometimes it sucks because you're like, oh, I kind of could have used that right now, you know, the sale or whatever it is. But really, it's just like, I just want to be available to help people. And we have to shift ourselves in that manner. I don't know how to get people there. Maybe that's a discussion for another episode.
Yeah.
Since
Yeah,
we're
episode 2.
episode 2.
Episode 10. The force reawakens and finds its meaning in life, or something like that. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
There you
yeah.
go.
So
Little Star Wars
make
reference
a
for you.
note of that, Sadie, for the next episode. So we really appreciate you
Yeah.
joining us
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
guys. Appreciate it.
and talking with us. And obviously, if Sadie could put on the show notes, we love you, Sadie. Look how cute she is. It's just, she's like, what? You're talking to me. Just connections to Rich, so that like people can find him for work, and just by looking at the notes, as well as Rich's podcast,
Yes,
because
check it
that
out.
sounds really cool. Have you been a guest on it?
She
Yes,
has.
Awesome. I haven't yet.
Let's talk.
Talk.
I'm booked until the end of February, but I'll squeeze you in.
Okay. Yeah, either way, it's fine. Sorry, I'm laughing at myself. It's like it just comes out.
All right.
So thank you very
We
much.
would love
for
to have
this.
you on, Garrett.
I would love
Oh.
to join you and discuss whatever questions you ask.
Yeah, we sit over there in the big comfy chairs. It's nice.
I know I've seen that. That's really cool. So thank you again for joining us, and
Yeah.
thank you for listening. And again, if you have any questions, concerns, ideas, we'd love to have that feedback and communicate with you, as we want to serve you and help you find purpose and meaning
Yeah.
in life.
Perfect.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.